spiritual. I'm loving the diversity of stuff that we're hearing about over these couple of days that can help us to take us to the next level of health and wellness. I'm really excited about hearing our next speaker. I just met Shyam Barr before, and Shyam's a lovely guy, so it was lovely to chat and connect in the break. He's talking about mastering the art of reflection. Shyam is one of those professionals who really lives his work. He's an educator who's driven to help people become better learners. He's currently completing a PhD investigating the factors, motivational, cognitive, and metacognitive, that influence the learning mindset of individuals. So if I can sum that up, he's a learner, learning about how learners learn, so he can help teach people to be better at learning. Thank you. Please welcome Shyams.
Thanks for that introduction. I just wanted to start by saying that this space and the speakers have actually prompted quite a lot of reflection for me, and hopefully the same for you. And I think these spaces, or these conferences, typically tend to do that. And part of the problem is that often we get really energized and excited about the ideas, and then we walk away back into, if you want to call it the real world or the normal life that we live. And a lot of those ideas get lost. And I think reflective practice is possibly that process that we can use to help instill some of these ideas in our life. So the other thing I noticed actually with these the sessions was that we always had two questions just before the breaks, the aha moments, the takeaways. And so reflective practice was built into the conference, and I thought, great, I've done my job, I don't need it. Before I talk too much about reflection, I'm very conscious that I'm going to influence your responses to the question I'm going to ask you. And the question, before I get into my story, is this: what is reflection to you? And I wanted you to just take a moment to write that down. I've used a sentence stem here, bracket forms. Reflection is, and just define reflection for yourself now, please. You can see the teacher coming out and me already activating prior knowledge, make sure we understand what we already know, maybe that foundation. And the primary reason for that is I'd love actually for you to take a moment and share your definition with the person next to you, because I'm really curious to know if you share the same definition as the person next to you. So off you go. I was showing a few people up the front here trying to listen. Raise your hand if you had a similar definition to the person next to you. Okay. A few more on this side and less on this side. Yeah, it's unlikely that we have exactly the same definition, but similar seems more likely. And I guess, I was speaking with friends yesterday about the fact that we actually all come to the idea of reflection from different perspectives, with different angles, I guess. And that defines how we then engage in reflection, because we all have different knowledge that underpins that. And so it was really important for us to engage that before I then influence your definition with the definition from the literature. So I'll read this out. Reflection is a generic term for those intellectual and affective activities, so cognitive and feeling, activities in which individuals engage to explore their experiences in order to lead to new understandings and appreciations. And I highlighted the to explore their experiences in order to lead to new understandings and appreciations, because we often associate reflection with happening after an event. It's reflection on. So, the questions that we've had after the sessions have occurred after. They're not before, they're not during, they typically happen after. And so, more often than not, when we think about reflecting, we're reflecting on something. The other reason why I like this particular definition is the intellectual and affective, and we've heard that that's come through a few different presentations. This combination, I think Al or Jeffrey mentioned it yesterday in terms of the head and the heart type scenario, and so that's important to recognise as well. So in terms of activities, if you're a coach, you probably use the good old scaling question quite often. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate yourself as a reflective practitioner? So a reflective practitioner is someone who engages in those activities, those intellectual and affective activities. How would you rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10? It's based on your own, I guess, understanding and reflection. Let's find out. Maybe excluding work-life experience or work-LifeX. Try and think maybe over the last week, how would you rate yourself? Just write down a number. And maybe once you've got your number, justify it. Just write down why you gave yourself a 10, a 9, an 8, a 7, etc. Whatever you gave yourself. Why don't you give yourself that number? What is it about your practice that justify that? So what I wanted to do now is share a little bit about that. Very kindly gave me that introduction, told you a little bit about my story, but I wanted to share a little bit more about my story and my, I guess, entry point into reflective practice. Because reflection is something that I've done for a lot of my life, and I probably did it at a very low level. It was reasonably habitual. It happened just if I was in the car on the way home from work, I was thinking about stuff. Maybe it was in a conversation with a friend, and that's pretty much the extent to it. Sometimes when I read a book, I reflected a little bit more, but it was pretty low level reflection. And I was working as an executive at a school, and I loved my job. I was very busy, and I know busy is an interesting word to use, but I was busy. But I loved my job. And one day, as part of the executive, I think there were 12 of us, the boss, the principal, brought in a speaker, a leadership coach to come and work with us. And the leadership coach came and worked with us. I don't know if you've heard of Margie Worrell. Margie Worrell was the lady who came to work with us. She was talking to us about having tough conversations. Having tough conversations with staff and having tough conversations with parents. I don't know what it was about that presentation, but for some reason I internalised that as having a tough conversation with myself. And she gave us a book. She gave us a book called Stop Playing Safe, and I read the book as I do. I love learning, and I read the book, and I drew all over it. And I started to ask myself the question, am I playing safe? And I reckon that was probably the turning point for me. I know other people have had these kind of rather larger experiences. Mine are not as profound, perhaps. It was as simple as that. You know, I read the title of the book, and I ended that into a question, and that was like, oh wait, hold on. I'm playing safe here. Like, I love what I do, but maybe it's safe. And if this is safe, what's unsafe? And so I started to get really interested in that. I had an opportunity to get into cognitive psychology and start learning about that. And as I developed my knowledge, that really shifted the way I looked at what reflection is. And I thought what reflection being this daily kind of mundane practice that I just did habitually and more often than not automatically, actually required a little bit more effort and a little bit more skill and strategy. And I had to take that to the next level. And so I started learning about this and I started installing the daily rituals that Helen and Lucas, you've got to commit to those. And so I did. And I built, probably the two big game-changing ones for me was my morning routine. I built in a reflective practice kind of routine in the morning where I used questioning to get me to focus and refocus on my goals. And the other one was kind of an evening routine. If you've heard of the app on my phone called Grid Diary, I use Grid Diary, really simple structured tool where you set yourself, you can create your own questions or you use some of their predetermined questions and they're just prompts, just like we've had at the end of every session. I set myself up 8 questions and at the end of every day I just use those questions to help keep things at the forefront of my mind. And there could have been any questions. They weren't work related for me. One was, how did I make my wife smile today? Can I say a new Spanish phrase? And so whatever questions I needed, I set them up as prompts to keep those things at the front of my mind. So as I was learning about the cognitive psychology of reflection, I very quickly discovered that there's some really, and this list could go on for a long time. But reflective practice leads to greater self-awareness. And one of my favourite authors, Robin Sharma, he has a quote that he says, "Awareness precedes choice, and choice precedes results." And I love that. And I thought, wow, if I can develop greater awareness, then I can make better choices. And with better choices, I'll see better results. This is golden. And so as I was developing this greater self-awareness, obviously I was getting this enhanced cognitive growth. So stronger connections with the stuff that I was learning. Obviously, a lot of my work is in the learning context. But I was learning things faster, so I was mastering skills now in short periods of time. And isn't that golden? In a world where we're fighting to be productive, well, speeding up our learning could be a great thing that actually happens if we engage in reflective practice. There's other benefits, creative and critical thinking, all sorts. There were 3 things that I realised. It was where I did it, when I did it, and how I did it. So how was I engaging in reflective practice? Where was it going to happen? Was it going to happen at home? Was it going to happen in my office? Was it going to happen in the car on the way home, multitasking while I was driving? We know the research around multitasking. We know that attention is limited. We have one basket of attention, so how you divvy that out is up to you. I wanted my reflective practice to have 100% attention. So I knew driving wasn't going to be the choice. It had to be in a space that would allow me the opportunity to not be distracted. So I chose home. And we were lucky enough to have a spare bedroom, so the spare bedroom it was. When was I going to do it? That was important for me. Again, I worked a busy job and 120 emails a day. I didn't have a lot of time to build reflective practice into a space in the job that I was in. But I had space outside of that. And so I went with the morning and evening. So that's how it works for me. And then, like I said, the quality is how you engage in it. Okay, and I used questions. Questions has been the biggest thing for me in the structure of the questions that I use. And I was telling Matt before that, reflecting on Ben's presentation, where he was talking about community and community being based on the quality of the conversation. I can relate to that. And I actually would take that a step further. And I think if you think about the quality of the conversation you have with yourself, so that inner dialogue that we have with ourselves daily, that is a conversation. It's a conversation between me now, me in the past, and me in the future. And it's happening right now. And it's that conversation, if we can improve that conversation, the quality of that, it's a game changer. And the way to do that is by changing the quality of the questions in my mind. So I changed the questions, and that led to a deeper critical reflection that I was starting to engage with. Okay. So some strategies to think about. And these are, I guess, patterns that I've seen in the research. I haven't gone into the research today, it's hard to do in the time that we have. And so I've picked out what I thought were the most important patterns to share with you today, and hopefully give you some takeaways that you can maybe start to embed in your own reflective practice. Has anyone heard of, raise your hand if you've heard of pre-flexion? Oh, okay, one, not two. Okay, great. Because I hadn't heard of it. Up until about 3 weeks ago, I read it in a journal article, and I was like, this is a joke. I thought it was pre-reflection. Surely it's pre-reflection. Or I wasn't sure what it was. Actually Googled it. I went from the journal article to Google my reliable source, just to see. And it was actually came up with a few articles. So I was like, okay, it's not just in this journal article. Other people have heard of this. So pre-reflection is our engagement in, I guess, reflection prior to an activity. Okay, and it's not something that we typically think of when we think of reflection. And we can ask ourselves questions like, what's the goal? What is it that I'm wanting to achieve here? What are the strategies that I'm going to use? In the science of learning, what is my self-efficacy for this task? So how confident am I to achieve what it is that I'm setting out to do? How many of us actually thought coming to Work+LifeX? I know we had the intention bracelets, and I thought that was great, because I thought, okay, here we are, we're having to make a choice about that goal, that intention that we want to bring into this conference. Question prompts, I mentioned some of the question prompts that I've used. You can create those in any way, shape or form. There's been a lot of questions that have come out of the sessions. If you were listening, I know Kemi was someone that really stood out to me yesterday, and her process that she took us through were questions. And those are questions you could build in to the time that you engage in that reflection. If you want to build boundaries into your life, well, put boundaries on the priority list for your reflective practice time and use those questions to help keep you on track. So there's enough questions that have come out of the sessions, I think, that we can use. And just to link those into multiple perspectives. So my research is in a field called epistemic cognition, which is the way we think about knowledge. And I specifically look at how we think about learning knowledge, so the body of knowledge that underpins learning. And multiple perspectives is a really critical one. It's called reflexive thinking, or scientific words, epistemic reflexivity. And it's as simple as, in the moment, asking ourselves, what would this mean for Emma? How would Emma respond to this? How would the government respond to this? How would my wife respond to this? What does this mean for my wife? How is this different for her than it is for me? And again, Kemi said this yesterday when she was asking her client, did your client agree to that? Straight away I was thinking, there's that multiple perspective. Put the lens on and think about it from someone else's shoes. Because that's a really key skill, which our critical reflectors and deep thinkers will be using. Scheduled, I've spoken about. Shared's a great one. Shared's if you're sharing with friends, so you can actually reflect with friends, that's fine. Grab a coffee. Be careful it doesn't go into gossip, particularly in the workplace. Reflection in workplaces can shift into gossip really quickly. I'd go to get a coach. Coaches have, again, there's a number of coaches here, so they understand the value in coaching, is that they have an external perspective. It reminds me of the quote by Einstein, I think it was Einstein, you can't solve a problem with the same level of thinking that created it. And so sometimes you have to get out of your own sort of internal echo chamber. It doesn't matter how hard you've been reflecting, and you've been searching for the solution. Sometimes you have to get out of your head and you actually need someone who has a different perspective to come in and ask that question. So yeah, sometimes you need that external prompt. So shared idea. And yeah, the final one there, I would say develop your knowledge. That's critical. In the field of reflection and self-awareness and metacognition, one of the key things to increasing your metacognition is developing your knowledge of cognition. Yeah, you have to actually have an understanding of what that means and what that looks like. So if you don't know a lot about this sort of stuff, learn about it. It's a really good step in the right direction. So of these 6 things, what could you do to increase your score by just 1? So if you scored a 6, how would you move it to a 7? Take a moment to write that down for me now. So at this time of the day, I wanted to leave a few minutes for questions because I thought, you know what, it's potential fatigue coming in, particularly after 2 days of big ideas. And so I want to open it up to the room. If you've got questions specific to the space of reflection or perhaps the way I reflect or the science behind it, I'm happy to answer questions as best as I can. We have mics around here. That's great. Does anyone have questions about reflection?
Thank you. That was very reflective. From a practical perspective, can you tell us the name of that app that you use? And also, do you set a time around your practice or do you let it flow?
Fantastic questions. Thanks, Jen. So to answer the first question, the app that I use, again, I don't know if it's available on Android. It's a reasonably straightforward app, but it's called Grid Diary. So Grid, Grid Diary. And you have the options in there to create how many questions you want and things like that. Really straightforward. In terms of so that's the evening routine. And that I keep really brief. And I actually do it just before bed. Even though I sleep with my phone in the other room, I do it before I plug my phone in on charge. And so it doesn't take me very long. I try to keep that brief because I know I'm not a night person, I'm a morning person. And so at night time I'm pretty exhausted. But what I found is by engaging in that activity, it's strange in a way that it almost keeps those ideas at the forefront and I take that through to the next day. So when I wake up the next day, I have a morning routine that involves 20 to 30 minutes of meditation, and then I go into a learning phase. And that learning phase is where I build in the reflective practice. So I've experimented with strategies like morning pages, if you've heard of morning pages, which is 3 pages of basically your stream of consciousness, just writing it down, so almost like a brain dump. It works for some people. I found it exhausting. I tried it and I was like, oh, I can't do this. It just didn't work for me. I went for free flow journal writing as well, which I quite like. But again, the unstructured nature of it for me didn't work. It works for some people. So what I found was then I actually again used prompts because prompts, for whatever reason, the way I think was responding quite well to these prompts. So I had my vision, my mission, my values that I had as my prompts to reflect. And so those were the prompts that I used as opposed to questions, just these kind of elements that I would reflect on first thing in the morning. So I had my questions at night time, which were kind of daily, kind of, can I say a new Spanish word, and did I go to the gym and things like that. And I guess the morning was the deeper stuff to kind of keep me on track with where I wanted to go and where I want to be. Is that fine? Sorry, I think I moved into
One more question if there's one in the room. Yeah.
of the challenges I find is I might have 6-8 coaching conversations with different people in the course of a day, multiple conversations on multiple topics. Reflecting at the end of the day is difficult because you've got 8 or 10 conversations as well as your own interpretation of that. Have you got any thoughts on how you might overcome that?
Sorry, are you a coach or are you coaching in your workplace? Which one's
A coach.
coach? So, well, 8 to 10's a lot, isn't it? Wow, that's it's cognitive load. That's a hard one for me to answer because we know that there's going to be a limitation to how many decisions you can make and the quality of your thinking as the day goes on. So obviously trying to engage in reflection at the end of the day after 8 to 10 coaching conversations is going to be depleting. And to be able to ask yourself those questions that you've spent so much time dedicating to other people, I'm tipping you're going to get the dregs. So I would, if I was you, move your practice first thing in the morning and try and build your reflective practice first thing in the morning before you engage with the 8 to 10. Because that reflection could guide the way you then behave in the 8 to 10. So even if you were first thing in the morning reflecting on the previous day's conversations, fine. I think that's still going to influence your behaviour for the rest of the day, but I think that's going to be a better option. I don't know.
Thank you so much, Shyam. Thank you. Great to be talking about reflection. Oh, that was just coming from me. It's my heart smiling. Great to be talking about reflection at this end of the day, and I'm going to introduce the wonderful Kate to come on over. Give her a round of applause. Kate's got a reflective activity for us to take part in now.
I do. So I'm just going to get Kate and Simon to start handing around those little white tickets. You're all going to get a little white piece of paper. And what I would love you to do is write on that piece of paper, from the day so far, what is the one thing that you really needed to